I like to put my honey sticks in this basket, but you can also use it for candy or a jar of honey. It's also the perfect size for most candles if you want to use it as a candle holder as well. I also think it would be cute in a nursery for something that you have in there. I'm going to be using a 4-inch wood basket bottom, and I will have a link in the description box for that. And I will start the project with a 3.5 millimeter and a 6.5 millimeter, and I'll show you why I do that. The 6.5 millimeter is too thick to fit through the holes, and so I use the smaller hook to grab the yarn through the holes. And I'm going to use white crochet t-shirt yarn, but you can also use any color that you want. I just like the way the white looks. I've also done it in gray. And the yellow t-shirt yarn is thinner than the white, and that works better for this because you're going to be looping over so many times that if your yarn is the same thickness as the white yarn is, which is pretty thick, then it's going to be very bulky. You can use the same thickness if you want. I just like the way the thinner yarn looks for this. So they're from 2 different companies, and I will put a link in the description box for both yarns. So to get started, I like to have a tail that's about 10 times the width of this particular basket bottom. And I will use the tail to complete each row so it gives it a nice clean look. And then I will use the 3.5 millimeter to grab the yarn through the hole. And then I will switch to the 6.5 to make the actual single crochet. So start with a single crochet in the first one, and then another single crochet in the second hole, and then an increase stitch, which is 2 single crochets in the same hole. Make sure that you keep your tail off to the side and you're not using your tail to crochet with. And then we're just going to repeat that. Single crochet, and increase. And the last hole should be an increase. So if your basket bottom has a different hole number, then you will need to figure out how many increases and where your increases are if it doesn't end in an increase. And then before you complete your single crochet for the last stitch, use your tail, pull your tail all the way through, tighten with the working yarn so that it gets that single crochet nice and snug where it looks just like the other ones. Come in from the back of your first stitch, pull your tail all the way through, and then go into the back of the last stitch, go through that back bump, and then come into the center part of that last stitch, and that's where we're going to pull our tail through so that it looks like it's a complete stitch, the same way all of the other stitches look. This is how I usually close all of the rows in my projects. For the rest of our project, we are going to be using the 6.5 millimeter hook. And for this row, we're going to be going into the back loop only and through the back bump. And that just pulls the walls up tighter and prevents a whole gap being at the base of your basket. So go through the back loop, go through the bump, grab your working yarn, keep your tail out of the way, and make a single crochet. And we will do a single crochet in the back loop only and the back bump for the rest of this row. And again, we will close this row using our tail. So once you get to the point where you are going to do the yarn over and complete, grab your tail, do your yarn over, and complete your single crochet by pulling the tail all the way through. You should now be able to pull your walls up. Use the working yarn to pull that stitch to make it the same size as the ones next to it. Come in through the back of your first stitch, grab your tail, pull your tail all the way through. Now go to the last stitch, go through that back bump and through the middle of the stitch, grab your tail, pull your tail through to complete the closure of the row. Take your working yarn and your tail to pull all of the stitches so that they're all the same size. And for row 3, we're going to do single crochet and a single crochet spike alternating. And the single crochets are going to be a waistcoat stitch. And in order to do the waistcoat stitch, you insert your hook into the center V of your stitch. And when you put your hook in there, you can feel that back bump. You want to go to the left side of that. I'm not sure why it is, but if you go to the right side, it just doesn't look right and your stitch is all stretched out. So you need to go to the left side. When you're doing this pattern, you do need to have a multiple of 2. So if you don't have an even number in your base after you do your increases, then you need to adjust that, because that first row where we did our single crochet in every stitch, that row needs to be an even number to make this turn out right. So our next stitch is going to be a spike stitch. So you go down to the row below and insert your hook into that same spot and complete your single crochet. And now we're just going to repeat that. So a waistcoat single crochet, and a spike stitch. And continue that until you get to the end of that round. And we started with a regular single crochet, and you're going to end with a spike. And that way you don't have the two of the same stitches next to each other at the end of a round. So when you get to the end of that round, it should be a spike. And it will be if you have an even number. So complete that last stitch with your tail. So do your yarn over and pull all the way through. And then go to your first stitch. So that's your turning, your first chain one basically. And so this is your actual first stitch right here. And then just like before, go to the back bump and through the middle of the last stitch to grab your tail and pull through to complete that round. Pull your working and your tail yarn to get all of your stitches even. And now you're just going to repeat that for the rest of your project. Very simple. You do need to make sure that each row is started with a single crochet. It just makes it look better, so you don't have a twist in your yarn by going down to the spike. So you need to have your single crochet on top of a spike stitch. So make sure when you start that next row, that first stitch is on top of the spike. And then when you do your spike, you're going down to the next row, and now your spike stitches will all be staggered. And that's it until you get to the height that you want your basket to be. I usually do this basket and candle holder baskets about 6 inches, but you just make whatever size works best for what you're using it for. And once you get to the height you want, I'm going to add a slip stitch just to kind of cinch the top and kind of bring it in so it looks a little bit like a jar. And I'm going to weave the tail in because we're not going to use that tail at the end of this. We're going to make another one. And when you're weaving in a tail using a slip stitch, you need to alternate putting the tail on the top of the hook and then behind the hook. That's the only way to get it to hide within the slip stitch. So putting it in front of, and then the next one you'll need to take the tail and put it behind the hook. And just complete your slip stitches until you have 1 stitch remaining. At this point, the tail is getting a little bit hard to hold on to, so it is weaved in plenty enough. So I'm just going to leave it there, and then I'm going to come back and cut it off. When you have 1 stitch left, go ahead and cut your yarn. And now we're going to use that to complete the row. Pull it all the way through. And then go over to your first slip stitch. Come behind the stitches. Grab your tail. Pull your tail through. And go over to the last stitch and close it up. You want to go right in the middle of those stitches. Or I mean in the middle of those loops. And tighten all your loops up. And now you are done with the jar base. I'm going to cut that tail. And the other new tail that you made, we're going to weave that in with the yellow. So to start the yellow, you do need to leave a little bit of a tail, not nearly as long as you did before, because you're only going to do a couple of rows. But we are going to do the 6.5 millimeter hook for this as well. And we're going to go ahead and cast on with our yellow. And then you need to keep your tail out of the way. And make a stitch just so that it's locked in good. We're going to weave in the white as we go. And at the end of each stitch, so right where the stitches are inserted, that is going to be where you put your hook. And I'm going to show you how I sort of insert the hook in different places to get the drippings, but this is really where you can be creative and just do whatever you want. So you can make the length of your drippings any way you want it to go, any pattern. It's just really up to you. Just get creative with it and do it however you want. And I'll just demonstrate the technique, and then you can just pick whatever pattern you want. But I do have the hook enter at the base of each stitch. It's probably not necessary. I imagine you can put the hook in anywhere you want. That's just how I choose to do it. So this is why you need a thinner yellow, because you are going to be having many different layers, some of them more than others. And if you have a really thick yellow yarn, it's going to get really bulky and hard to work with. So I just enter a spot, yarn over, and then go down to another spot. And you just go down to as many spots as you want for how long you want it to be. And then just go to the next stitch. So I just enter the top and then go down a row and then just keep yarning over and going down rows for however long you want the drip to be. You don't need to yarn over for the first initial inserting of your hook. As you go down many rows to make a longer drip, it does get very difficult to keep all of your loops together. So there is another way that you can do it. And of course, you can do this on the shorter ones as well. But it particularly helps when you are going several rows down. You can take your smaller crochet hook and use that to insert into the rows down below. Grab the yarn and pull it through the hole until you can grab it with your hook. And by doing this, it also allows you to take that loop that you just pulled through and you can twist it. And that gives the drippings, just a little bit of extra twist to it, which I think looks kind of cool. So you can twist it as much as you want, or you can choose to not twist it, but having that extra hook really comes in handy when you are doing the rows that go down pretty far, if you choose to have your rows go that far. When you get towards the end, take a look at your pattern that you have going on and decide if you need more short or more long. Um, and that way you kind of know what you're going to end with. Now, I will say that I ended this with a longer one, but it's better if you end with a shorter one because of the way you close the row. It's just easier to close with the tail if you don't have a lot of loops on your hook. when you get to your last stitch, you will close that row with your tail, just like you did all the other rows. So this is the reason that it's better to end with a shorter drip so that you don't have as many loops on your hook. It just gets a little more difficult to get that last drip straight when you have a bunch of loops on your hook. And you're going to end your row by closing it with the tail, just like you did all the other rows, coming in from behind and grabbing that tail. And it looks like I missed a loop. So this is the reason that a long drip at the end is not wise. It's just too easy to miss one of those loops when you're closing it. So I'm just going to go through and get all my loops back. Make sure I have them all and then close it with the tail. Also, coming through all of those loops in the back is not as easy, so I'm only going to grab a few of them with the shorter or the smaller hook. And then tighten all of your loops up. So shorter one is definitely the way I would go by ending that. So when you're starting it out, plan ahead to have a shorter one at the end. And then I'm just going to weave a little bit of that tail. And then we're going to weave the tail in when we do a slip stitch around the top. So the slip stitch is just going to be the same way we did the white. We're just going to kind of pull it tight and cinch it in so it sort of pulls all of those drippings towards the center. And weave that tail in so that you don't have two tails at the end. Just go through the two loops. And just like before, you need to weave the tail front and back when you're doing a slip stitch. When you get to the last stitch, you're going to cut your yarn and pull the tail all the way through and close it up just like we did the slip stitch row with the white yarn. and close up your row by tightening your loops so they all look similar. And that's the end of it. So we will need to weave in our tail with a crochet needle. And now you're done, and you can take your bee charm and glue it onto the basket. I put gloves on so I don't get super glue on my hands, and then I take the super glue and I put it on the wings, and I fill the little divot that's in the body of the bee. And then with tweezers, I turn it over and put it on the basket. You can also use hot glue.